my talk is kind of two parts here. A year ago, I gave a talk on Vicks who fought at Vicksburg, and kind of in anticipation to coming to Vicksburg and, going to the battlefield. And, this is two presentations. One is the Vicks who migrated to Mississippi first, and when they migrated, what the families were and where they were located. And then the second part is a condensed version of the Vicks who fought at Vicksburg. Because if you're going to take a tour of the battlefield, I can tell you exactly where. Also, I did a quick tour of the battlefield when I got here, and I now know where they have stops along the battlefield, places where you can stop and an event happened there. And I now know where the stops are. And so I've added that to the slides. So let me go ahead and get started here. So everyone knows that the first Vicks that showed up in Mississippi were Newitt, Thomas, and Burwell brothers. And they got here, I don't have an exact date. Maybe John has a better date than I have, but it's early 1800s, and they were from the fourth generation. They're fourth generations from the William branch. I'm going to give you the generation and then which branch of the family they came from and where they came from.
Updated it beyond.
And they came from Southampton, Virginia. Okay, the next person to show up, or the next family, I didn't just do individuals. They kind of had to be a family that migrated to be included in this talk. Around 1825, Isaiah, fifth generation, showed up in Yazoo County, which is just north of this county here, Warren County. And they came from, they were also from the William branch, although I didn't really get a sense that they were that closely connected. And they were from the William branch. They came from Anson County, North Carolina, to Tennessee, then to Yazoo, and then to Hinds County, and then to Madison County, and then to Attala County. And they were, Isaiah 5 really had a lot of wanderlust. And it seemed like he kept going to different places. He'd buy a farm and farm it for a while and then leave it, almost like he was looking for better farmland. But he ended up landing in Attala. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Attala, is that the way you'd pronounce it? You may have to help me with some other pronunciations, especially this next one. So 1831 to 1834, William V, fifth generation, from the Richard II branch, showed up in, Octibaha. Okay, that's, and they came from Nash County, North Carolina. It seems like a lot of Vicks came from North Carolina. A lot of them came from Virginia. Some of them kind of went in a roundabout way. But then by 1834, there were three main family groups in Mississippi. And then 1831 to 1834, the Ransom Five came to Marshall County, and he's of the John II branch. He came from Greensville County, Virginia, then to Tennessee, then to Marshall County. So he came a little bit roundabout way as well. Then if we keep progressing, the John Lewis Five arrived in Lafayette County. And John Lewis and Ransom were kind of closely related. I mean, I think they both had this similar grandfather, and they both were from Greensville County, Virginia. But I didn't really get that there was much of a connection between them. I did, normally you see a lot of land records where they're right next to each other, or census records where they're very close. It seemed like Ransom was kind of in far north Marshall County, and John Lewis located his family more further down in Lafayette County. Now, just about right before the Civil War, all of the family members from the John Lewis side moved to Panola County. And so I kind of show the little arrow there where they first landed. Just as a side note, there was a Irish family, the Macaulay family in Lafayette, and there were four marriages between Vicks and the Macaulays. So it was a pretty serious chemistry going on there. The next one who showed up in 1849 in Clark County, William Five, and he was from the Richard II branch, and he came from Virginia or Georgia. I'm still not sure. And he then went to Wilcox County, Alabama, which is pretty close to Mississippi, and then ultimately to Clark County in Mississippi with his family. The last family that arrived, there's actually two families that arrived right before the Civil War. One was Maston Crawford. He was a sixth generation Vick, and he's from the Robert II branch. He came from Anson County. Again, there are quite a few that came from that county, to Lauderdale County. He was the first one in Lauderdale. So this is kind of basically these seven families founded the Vicks in Mississippi before the Civil War. So now let's get into the Civil War.
Looks like we're only missing the Joseph II line.
I was going to say that.
Oh, you were?
No, the Joseph II line. Everybody but Joseph. Yeah. I wasn't going to say it. I figured guys like you would figure that out. So the Vicks fighting at Vicksburg. First, there were quite a few Vicks that were in the Civil War. 409 Vicks were in the database of soldiers and sailors. Roughly 80% fought for the South, and 20% for the North, which you would expect because we're a Southern family. Started in Virginia, and I checked. There were some black regiments fighting for Grant at Vicksburg. I found no Vicks with surnames among them in the database. That doesn't mean there weren't any. And while I found no descendants of Newitt Vick and his brothers at Vicksburg, some were in the Confederate Army or captured by the North. So that doesn't mean they weren't involved. While only I only found 6 soldiers with the surname Vick and in the battle. That surprised me. I thought with that many Vicks in the database that we would have had more at Vicksburg. But I did some math, and I kind of went down the different generations and said, okay, if we have 4 children, 2 males, 2 females, the males are obviously Vicks, the females their descendants won't be, but they'll still be passing down the Vick. They're still descendants when they have kids. And so I did that through 7 generations. I think every Vick who fought at Vicksburg, both North and South, was 7th generation. So when I went down 7 generations, you had about 400 descendants, but only 1% of them had the surname Vick. So there were many, many more descendants. And maybe if somebody, yes, sir.
I wanted to add one new village map. Kind of light off, no way, in the Vicksburg campaign, unit that was defending Jackson, that was living after the fall of Vicksburg, Sherman came to burn Jackson again. Sherman was very good at signing.
Yes. He wasn't very good when he first started out.
He practiced.
Yeah, he practiced. He actually attacked Vicksburg up north of Vicksburg, and it was marshy. I mean, what general would attack when your enemy's up on bluffs and you have to wade through water? You know, that's just a recipe for disaster. But you're right, he practiced, he got better. So here are the soldiers. There are 3 brothers from John Lewis. Well, I'll get into that. But there were 2 brothers from Louisiana, Sergeant Samuel D. Vick and Private William J. Vick. They were in the 27th Louisiana Infantry Regiment, and their regimental, monument is there in the battlefield. You can see exactly where they fought. Private Sam, and then these 3 brothers are John Lewis's children. Private Samuel J. Vick, 14th Battalion, Mississippi Light Artillery, John James Vick, 14th Battalion, Mississippi Light Artillery, and Private Peter Tamlin Vick. From the north side, there was one from Ohio. Did I hear somebody's here from Ohio? Private Penrose Vick was in the 3rd Independent Battery, Ohio Light Artillery. Let me see what the next slide is. Here's the different lineage. So Samuel D. and William descended from the William II line. And you can see their 7th generation go to Simon, Moses, Aaron, Isaac, William, Joseph. Thank you, John Beatty, for your book, because this is so easy to do this slide. And then, of course, John James, Peter Tamlin, and Samuel J. were descendants from John Lewis back through John and then to Joseph. And then the northern combatant here was Isaac Penrose, and he descended from Exum, Pilgrim, William, and Richard. So, Larry, who's missing here? We got a William, we got a John, and a Richard. We're missing 2.
Robert, Joseph.
Yeah. No, I don't know what difference that makes. And I had some honorable mentions because there were kind of so few, and I wanted to be able to talk about something, but these actually were pretty good honorable mentions. John Wesley Vick, he descended from Newitt, and is it Newt or Newitt? Newitt. Okay. Newitt. Thank you, Jerry. He descended from Newitt, from the William line, and he basically gave his house. He had a house in town. They called it a townhouse, but it was a big house on a lot of land. And during the battle, he gave his house to the Confederacy to use as a hospital. And this guy back here, you'll see, wait a minute. John right here, John James, he didn't get shot at Vicksburg, but he became ill during the siege when they were starving them out. And apparently he said, a descendant from the founder took me into his house and nursed me back to health. Well, maybe a little exaggeration since it was a Confederate hospital. He wasn't the only person to be nursed back to health. Then there's a General Thomas Eugene Vick. He descended from this John Wesley. So he was, I forget what, he was like a major in the 4th Louisiana Infantry. And the South had a strange practice back then where they would, they voted their officers. So it was a democratic vote to see who was going to be the sergeants and the majors and the generals and whatever. And so John Thomas Eugene Vick, after 1 year, he got voted out. They didn't like him. So had he stayed with the 4th Louisiana, he would have been in the fight, in the thick of the fight. But he got mad and left and went back to, he was from Louisiana, went back to Louisiana and became a general in the Louisiana militia. Then there's Hartwell Overton Vick, also a son of John Wesley. And I couldn't see where he was ever in the service of the Confederacy. However, the federal troops captured him and kept him in prison until he was willing to sign a parole saying he wouldn't take up arms against the North. So I give him, if he was a prisoner of war, he gets credit. And then the last one here is my great-great-grandfather, Ernest William Krause. He was a band leader at Wall's Texas Legion at Vicksburg, and he was a future grandfather-in-law to my grandfather, Kyle Vick of Waco, Texas. So there was a future connection, so I said, I'll include him. And the other reason I included him is Wall's Legion was there was intense fighting around Wall's Legion. And some members of that group kind of saved the day from Grant one time. I don't know whether they saved it or
Fighting like war fighting?
war fighting, shooting, killing. No, this is guns and shooting and death. So here's Samuel Vick. And I'll get into this later, but Samuel and Peter traded places. Peter and John, the 2 of the 3 brothers, joined the 14th Light Artillery, and they were stationed at Vicksburg. They were in other battles in Mississippi too, but they were stationed at Vicksburg. And Peter went home in February of 1863, and his wife was there with 2 toddlers, with a baby and a toddler, and she was running their farm, and she was not able to handle it. So he talked his younger brother, his 16-year-old younger brother, Samuel, to go back in his place. That was another strange thing they did in the Civil War, where they would, if you could find somebody to take your space, you could stay home and send them. And since Sam didn't have a wife, a farm, or 2 kids, he talked him into going back in his place. And that's Peter. I don't have a picture of John. That's Ernest Krause, the one at Wall's Legion. And this is a painting of John Wesley Vick. I couldn't find any other likenesses. So this is the Vicksburg campaign. The first, Grant tried about 6 or 7 times to take Vicksburg, to get down to Vicksburg where he could take it. And every time he was repelled back, a lot of times by the river. I think I mentioned that, but one battle. And then just a lot of times he tried to build a canal to circumvent the Mississippi, and then the floods came and it washed that away. And so he kept trying and he kept failing. This is his last campaign that he was finally succeeded. And what he did was, he's up here, Grant is, he's up north. and he kind of snuck his troops across the river here and around, far enough around where they wouldn't see him, and way down below Vicksburg. And then they landed and they attacked Port Gibson here. There was a fort there, and they very easily overran them. And then they kind of chased the other, then of course the Confederates retreated toward Jackson, and they had another battle in Raymond, and they had another battle in Jackson. And by this time, Grant had sent some of his troops toward Jackson, so he kind of hitting them from both sides. Then there were a couple battles at Champion Hill, and then a battle at Big Black River Bridge. And finally, he chased all the Confederates in this area in Mississippi into Vicksburg, where they fortified Vicksburg. Pemberton was a general here, and they said he wasn't a very good general. And I'm not going to judge because I wasn't there, but it was obvious his troops were better at defending than they were at chasing federal troops and attacking in the open field. So if they had an area to defend, they were very good at it, as we'll see. Now, this is the battlefield. The Mississippi River used to flow right here. And so there were basically 4 locations where the Vicks were at during the battle. So John, Peter, and Sam were in the 14th Mississippi Light Artillery, and they were on Fort Hill, and that's right up here. Then Sam, the other Sam from Louisiana, and his brother William were in the 27th Louisiana Infantry, and they were stationed right here at right outside of the stockade Redan. Penrose was in the Independent Ohio Light Artillery, and he was located about here. If you go through the battlefield, there'll be they'll call it a battery de Gaulier, and de Gaulier was killed in the battle, and he ran the artillery, or he was in command. And there's a sign to the Independent Ohio Light Artillery, and you can see where Penrose was. And then right here, down here, south of the railroad, was where Wall's Legion and Ernest Krause was located. And they were at the railroad redoubt, which is the redans and redoubts. They're just forts that stick out from the walls. Let's see. Okay, so the safest place, one of the safest places to be at the Vicksburg battle was Fort Hill, because you can see these people never attempted to attack Fort Hill. That it was, there's a lot of water to cross. There's probably swampy stuff, very dense overgrowth. And it was just easier to attack some of these other locations where they could get closer. And so that might be why Peter convinced Sam to go back in his place, is, hey, this is the safest place on the battlefield. But that wasn't the case. There are 2 places where they have monuments for the unit that these Vicks were in. They were in Company B of the 14th Light Artillery, and there's a monument here. And by the way, there's a beautiful view. It's maybe the safest place. It's also the best view. So the scenery was better there. But about a 1/10 of a mile down the road, there was another monument here, And this is where I think Sam was. They split up, you know, you'll see multiple monuments where they string people out along the road. And so they had some of their artillery here and they had some of it here. During the Battle of the 19th, the fierce part of the battle was right here. They attacked the stockade redan. That's where the Louisiana Vicks were located. And that was not a safe place. There were a lot of casualties there. And the fighting was intense, very bloody, but they called for more artillery. And so there were two 12-pounders over here. And so they started to take those two 12-pounders and set them up where they could be useful to these attacking forces. And that's where Sam Vick got shot in the head. And I went back and read the reports of what the units did, the different units. And they said that they were transporting these two cannons to help out in this battle, but they were driven back by sharpshooters. So I think that's when good chance, you never know, that could have been when he got shot in the head. Now he got shot in the head. I didn't finish the story. And they took him to the field hospital, and the surgeons tried to dig out the bullet. Now these are big bullets. They're mini balls. They're about 6/10 of an inch in diameter, and they're lead. And so the surgeons tried to dig them out. I'm sure it was difficult, and they failed. They just kept pushing it deeper into his brain. So they decided to quit, figured he was going to die anyway. And he recovered. He got better and went back to the fight. And he was paroled at Vicksburg. Yeah. Back then, I guess you went back unless you couldn't walk or couldn't hold a rifle. So, and you see this arrow right here? That's called Thayer's approach. Thayer was a Union commander, and look at how close he got to the line there. So I'm guessing it was it was a sharpshooter from Thayer's group that drove him back and shot Sam in the head. Yes.
What's the red line? Is it a river?
This red line right here,
Yeah.
that is the Confederate fort. That's where they had their barricades.
So that's where the bad guys?
No.
Oh, we're the good guys. You know,
It-
that's
it-
the high ground, all of that red is
It-
the high ground.
Yeah.
What's her name?
Willa.
Willa. Well, I'm gonna tell you something, all that red line is the high ground. The Confederate Army of the local area of the South was on the high ground. And all those blue lines are trying to come up the hill.
They're trying
They
to,
got shot, a lot of those blue line people got shot because the high ground is advantageous in the battle. So Fort Hill's the highest hill in the city. And then, so Confederate Ridge and, these high ground. And, that's the best vantage points in the park is the high ground.
We take you to the background.
Yeah. The blue ones are the bad guys.
if
You know, I think they're big guys.
our ancestors were on the Confederate side. So were they the good guys or the bad guys? I don't know. So then over here is where Penrose Vick from the Ohio artillery was firing from. And that was also a very safe, relatively safe area. You're behind the way outnumbered Union troops, and you're shooting from behind the line. So the rebels would have to attack and get through the Union lines and to you. So that was a pretty safe place. Now here's Fort Hill. It's battlefield stop 9. And you have to get out of your car and walk up because you got a few steps to go up, and then you can see the vantage point And, and so right here, this is where Sam was shot in the head. Not, I don't think he was shot at, yes. That he wasn't in Fort Hill. He wasn't in Fort Hill. He was over here where it says the second section of the company under Lieutenant Shelton served 2 6-pounder guns and 1 24-pounder siege gun in this position, Fort Hill. They call it Fort Hill, but it's really, this one monument is about 1/10 of a mile closer to the stockade redan. So yeah, maybe it's a little contradiction. And John also, while he didn't get shot, he did contract disease and he went to the Vick home and recuperated there, and he too was paroled. Now, here's what I found. I didn't know which Vick it was, so I was trying to find who lived in Vicksburg at the time of the battle. And the only person I could find was John Wesley Vick, and he really lived probably at his plantation, but he did have what they called a townhouse. And so this was looks like a postcard of the Vick homestead, and it says it's used as a hospital during the siege. So I'm pretty sure this is where John went to recover, and where John Wesley maybe helped him recover, maybe not, maybe he exaggerated that part. Now, the 4th Vick, future in-law, was it, oh, wait a minute. The stockade redan was where the 27th Louisiana Infantry were. And this was a bloody mess. Brother Sam and William, they were in a very unsafe location. 27th Louisiana Infantry suffered heavy casualties. Among those killed included a colonel, a lieutenant colonel, a major, and a captain. Total casualties, killed, wounded, and missing, and if they're missing, they're probably dead, were 154. So that was a very, very bloody part of the battlefield. Now here's the 3rd Ohio Artillery. This is battlefield stop 1. It's, again, it says de Golier's battery, artillery or something. And that's the stop. But then there's this 3rd Battery Ohio Light Artillery and Captain S. Williams. And it said they had from May 25th to June 6th, they shot the guns off. And then July 4th, 1863, when Vicksburg surrendered, they had fired during the time of the siege 3,521 cannonballs. So think of all the artillery that was on both sides, and just this one artillery unit, the 3rd Battery, fired over 3,000 shells. And back then it was like, there was no civilian, no, no non-combatants. They actually, if y'all have seen the old courthouse, and it's real tall, it's one of the tallest points. The Navy was a few miles away down the Mississippi River. They were shooting, and they would use that as their aiming point. And that's right in the middle of Vicksburg. So civilians were killed, combatants were killed, and what do you call it? No food, no water, nothing during that. So now the railroad redoubt. This was intense fighting, but Wall's Legion was not in the fight when it first started. They were held in reserve. An Alabama regiment was in the fort, the fort itself.
I think they want to know a redoubt.
It's a fort. There's a redan, there's a redoubt. If you see it on the battlefield, it'll say railroad redoubt. Some French guy came up with all the different shapes of forts. So there's a lunette that looks like a moon, right? So you'll see a lunette on the battlefield. I don't know what a redoubt is or what a redan is, but somehow the US Army picked that up, and when they did the battlefield, that's what they called them.
Like dirt, it's piled up dirt.
Piled up dirt. It's a dirt fort. Yeah, I'll show you a picture. So this fort was captured by the North. The artillery fire from that morning blew a hole in the fort. So there was a way they could get in, and they captured this fort. They captured it in the morning, and they held it until the afternoon. So anyway, the Alabama group that had been pushed back by him tried to recapture it, and they all got cut down. And so then they went looking for other people, and nobody wanted to attack because now they're in the fort, right? And they've got a good position to hide. And so the Alabama guy went to Wall, who was in reserve, and he said, "Can I get some of your troops to help retake this?" This was the only breach the North ever had on the Vicksburg Wall. And he said, "I'm not going to order them, but if you can get volunteers, I'll let you do it." And so he got 30 volunteers. Some of them were from Alabama, most of them were from Walls, and they kind of played a trick. They had the troops in reserve do cover fire for them and shoot heavy fire at the fort to where the Union troops had to duck their head, and then they snuck up on the side on the wall, and then when they dropped a handkerchief, that was a signal to stop shooting, so you wouldn't shoot them. And then they real quick ran inside the fort and killed and captured the soldiers that were there. I'm guessing my ancestor was not being the band leader. They probably didn't ask him to volunteer. Although back then, nobody got out of the fight. If you were in the band, you went back to your unit and picked up a gun. So, this is a map of I'll call it the railroad fort. And they're basically guarding this railroad right here, because they can't put a fort over it, because that's how they get in and out the railroads. And if you look over in the upper right-hand corner here, you can see what one of these redoubts or one of these forts looked like. First off, they dug a ditch 9 feet down, and then they piled up dirt. And so there's a ditch there. So you have to go through this ditch, and then they piled up dirt and slanted it at such a steep slope that you really had to crawl your way up. You couldn't run up. And then back here was where the soldiers were. Yes. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Were the readouts, like the highlights, were they clear? Like if the opposing side would like walk over and see one, would they be like, "Oh, that's one," or are they supposed to be like hidden?
Oh no, you saw them. They stuck out like a sore thumb. For example, this one's 18 feet tall.
Oh,
Yeah. And just a couple side notes. When you see the battlefield today, it's got a lot of forest and growth. Back when they were preparing Vicksburg for the Union attack, they cut down all the trees on their side so that they could see the charges and the troops coming in. And then when Grant showed up and he put his soldiers on the on the low ground, he cut off all the rest of it. So there was in the real battle, there were no trees. And then in about 1930, some conservation group decided that wasn't right, that they needed to replant those trees. And so now you'll see a lot of trees in the battlefield where there weren't any in reality during that fight.
I didn't know they had people come in and plant trees, but I'm gonna tell you, there's no problem growing hard.
No,
With birds or whatever.
Yeah. they grow like weeds. I've never seen such big trees.
I don't know if y'all, the soil pipe we have is a wind-blown soil pipe called Lurs, or Lurs is our German word, but it's Loess. So, it was easy to dig, for them to dig and make the fort. It was also, the local people dug into the soil to make a cave for protection. And, it's the best hardwood growing soil in the world. It's also the most highly erodible soil in the world. So when that battlefield was cleared, it was a muddy mess when it rained.
If you look here, you can see where this right here is where the hole was in the fort. So the 22nd Iowa and the 21st Iowa were able to rush in, and that's where they climbed through and either captured or ran off the Confederate troops. But you can see all these other troops. I mean, they're right here. And I'm going to point this one out right here. See the 77th Illinois? Okay, I'm going to come back to that one. And here is where the lieutenant from Wall's Legion charged in with his 30 volunteers and captured or killed everybody that was in the fort. And then apparently they captured a lot. See all these? I mean, they got real close to the Confederate lines. And so once they recaptured it, they started shooting these guys. And I think they got more prisoners during that. So this is Battlefield Stop 13, Texas Wall's Legion, and talk about a bloody area in the battlefield. They had 245 casualties out of 381. 10 officers were killed or injured. And there was a note on this when I called up this Texas Wall's Legion. There was a note that said that most of this monument was donated by $200 from Private Henry E. Lucy from Company A, 77th Illinois Regiment. He was being pinned down by the Wall's Legion. I mean, he saw the whole thing. Remember, let me show you where he was. Here's the 77th. The guy who donated, they were killing each other in this battle. And years later, they respected each other enough and, that they were willing to donate to a monument to their enemy.
That was the Union soldiers.
The Union soldier did that. It cost $300 to build. He donated $200 of it.
When it says casualties, does that mean
Injured, killed. They had about 50 killed, and about 8 missing in action, and so that's about a 60, and the rest were injured. Yeah, and so that's a 64% casualty rate, one of the highest. And again, I was really struck when I saw that their enemy had actually donated to that monument. So all the Confederate Vicks and the band leader Krause were paroled at Vicksburg. Now Peter wasn't, because he had changed hands he swapped out with Sam. And I mean, you can get copies of their paroles today where they signed them. Now, what a parole meant was you couldn't fight unless you were exchanged for a Union POW. And so they all got exchanged and went back into the fight. The Mississippi Vicks, John and Sam, they were exchanged and rejoined the Confederate Army, serving at the end of the war. Krause was stationed at Galveston, where he married a local girl in August of 1865. He married a Galveston girl, which meant he was in Galveston on June 19th. Anybody know what June 19th is? Juneteenth. So he witnessed Juneteenth. That's when the Union colonel showed up and told everybody that the slaves were free. He moved back to Waco with his wife and raised a family. Now, this is what's funny. I'm always surprised by when I do this research. The Louisiana Vicks, Sam and William, returned to Louisiana and joined the Union Army. So they were kind of turncoats. Either they saw what the Union Army could do and they figured they were on the wrong side, or maybe they needed a job. I don't know.
Yeah, benefits would be great.
They must have been. Yeah, you don't get killed. And they joined the 1st Battalion Louisiana Cavalry Scouts. Isaac Penrose, who was the sole Vick, who was he was a sole Vick on the Union side that I was able to find. He returned to Ohio and raised a family and, lived out his life normally. Now, Thomas Eugene Vick, he's a different weird situation. He was blown up in a riverboat accident in 1866. His body was never found. Now, Larry and I have talked about this. He was being charged with murder. Okay, so it wasn't clear whether this was a revenge killing or whether he was trying to pretend, hey, I'm dead. I'm going to go somewhere else. It'd be interesting if we could find out which one it
Yeah,
was.
always hope we get some DNA.
It might be at the bottom of the Mississippi River.
Yeah, that's.
Now you say, well, okay, what happened after the war? Because you kind of figured a lot of these families would be decimated, and they were. The families that I had other family members that were not Vicks that fought in the Civil War, and the casualty rate was about 50%. If you were a male, and that's just in my family, I'm sure some were higher and some lower. If you were a male fighting age soldier in the Confederate Army, in our family, there was a 50% chance you would not survive the Civil War. Some of those, I'd say half of them were killed in battle, and the other half, disease, smallpox, different type diseases. So I kind of wanted to see, well, how many Vicks were left in Mississippi? There was 100 in 1860. In 1870, there was 127. And so I kind of look at this, and I looked at the list of the 127. There were a lot of young kids. So I'm thinking there was kind of a baby boom after the Civil War, just like there was after World War II. And so, yes.
What was the age for people to fight? Like how did they have to
The youngest was supposed to be 16, but some of them just lied about their age.
they wanted to?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
what? They want, oh, they're fighting.
yeah, yeah. They were fighting for their country. They were being attacked. Or in the case of Union, you had these rebels down there making trouble. So they had different reasons.
The older ones were how old? Some of them were
Yeah, that's the old one.
40 and 50.
Yeah. Yeah,
And this wasn't gonna last very long, by the way, so.
3 months.
And you get a free uniform.
Maybe,
Maybe.
if you live that long. I had another ancestor who was living in South Carolina at the time. He joined up for 1 year. Now, later, when they realized that this war is going to last longer, they would sign you up for the duration of the war, they would say. But after a year, he left. He went back home. He'd done his service. And, but anyway, and for those who are interested, obviously, they didn't enumerate the blacks by surname. And so in 1870, there were 84 blacks who took the surname Vick. I think that's the end. If anybody has any questions.
Good job, Papa.
If you can't answer anything.
I had to bring them, so somebody would be here to clap for me. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Did Sam have another name? Oh, well, I'll tell you. Okay, Sam Vick is the one who got shot in the head is the grandfather of Sam B. Vick, the founder of our organization. So, and he also played for the New York Yankees. He was a professional baseball player.
And Boston.
And Boston, yes. Do you have a question, Will?
Yes.
Oh, wait, Claire was first.
How are you such, how are you so good at? Oh, never question like that.
Thank you.
That's so nice.
That's a compliment. I don't know how to answer that, but okay, your turn, Willa.
Okay, so, I remember a while ago you told me, I think that, this was like involved in this, but, I remember a while ago, not a while ago, like a month ago, I forgot, a little while ago, you told me about, that someone in the war, I think it was the guy who got traded out for his brother, didn't he get smallpox or, what's it called?
No, they had a younger brother. So there were 5 sons
So he could stay in.
of John Lewis, I think 4 or 5. And all of them at one point or another signed up for Confederate. The first one who signed up was a guy named Edward Scott Vick. And in the early part of the war, the action was in Virginia. So he got sent to Virginia to fight in those battles there. And he got sick and he died in a hospital in Richmond, Virginia of smallpox. And he's buried in Hollywood Cemetery. And there's a monument to his,
I think you showed me the picture.
yeah, and I had that done because I found out if you had a relative, you could have a monument and the VA would pay for it. So they paid it. So after 160 years, he finally has a monument.
You also got one for somebody else.
I got one for a guy named James Lafayette Mayfield. And that's the other branch of the family, is the Mayfields who fought. And I found out he was buried there too, because I couldn't find him. I couldn't find him anywhere. I knew he had joined the Confederate forces, but I couldn't find. Oh, there was a will. No, there wasn't a will. There was they divided his property up after the war. So it's obviously he died. Obviously he died in the war. And then I found out during the time he died, there was heavy fighting at Richmond and St. Petersburg. I mean, really bloody stuff, you know. And so the ones who died in a hospital, there's a hospital record. But I think if you were just killed in action on the battlefield, they didn't really keep really good records. And so I couldn't find him in any hospital. So I just assumed he was killed in action.
But there was one that was buried in an unmarked grave and he had to pay for the plaque, if I remember correctly.
No,
Yeah.
Edward Scott Vick. He was buried in an unmarked grave. He died of smallpox in Richmond at a hospital, Confederate hospital. I didn't pay for the grave. You have to pay for the installation, like $100 or something.
Installation. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other one, the Mayfield, I found him there, not knowing where he was, just that he died during the war. Any other questions? If not, maybe I'll hand it back to,
Michael? That's okay. Michael, if you come up here, you can bring your children up here so we can record them on this video together.
okay, okay, everybody, come on up.
You can just sit down right there.
Ah,
There you go.
It's gonna get crowded here.
Great.
We're gonna, Sean.
You're gonna pass.
What are we doing? Come on, guys.
Okay, let's do it in two. Okay, you guys go sit down and the rest of you come up. Halen, Vick, Scott,
Dad,
come on, you're in the movie business. Come on. They,
Daddy.
Galen wanted us, the members of the family to crowd around because he's recording. He's recording this.
Love it.
Send Mom,
So-
Mom.
Hello. Who did the report? Halen? Get Halen up here. How about-
Are we recorded now?
Yeah, we're being recorded.
That's really creepy.
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Michael.
You're welcome.
So there was a question asked, why did some of these people fight for one side or the other? Well, for those of you who have served in the military, it's not, yes,
I just wanted to say hi to Jerry.
oh, come say hi to him right here. Okay? You say hi to him right here.
Hi, Jerry.
He's-
Hey,
just
can't you
wave at-
hear me?
Just wave at him. Okay.
Okay, finally got an answer. Okay.
Great. Anyhow.
Yes.
Sometimes when you're in the military, you're not really doing anything
My
other than,
signal is coming and going, so I can't hear it all.
all right, thank you, Jerry. Anyhow, sometimes when you're in the military, you don't choose. Your country tells you you have to do something and you might disagree with it, but you're supposed to do it. So when I served during Vietnam, I didn't join because I was like gung ho. I want to go out and do my part for my country. If you didn't join or enlist, you would be thrown in jail. And so you sort of had a choice. Okay. Some of our friends, they decided to go to Canada to leave their country. And many people said, no, I'm not leaving my country. I'm staying here. Now, do you know who won in the Vietnam War?
We got second place, as I recall.
We got second place. Yeah, that's right. So we lost. And you know how many men and women we lost in that war?
50,000.
What?
50,000.
64,000 today. Okay. And so what was the point? Someone would say, what a waste of time, but it really did kindle people because some people made decisions that they would support their government no matter what. And sometimes you just have to do that. Now, for the folks that went to Canada, do you know what happened to them? They avoided the draft and went to Canada.
They were pardoned.
They were pardoned. You know how we in the military felt about those people who were pardoned?
I'm not happy.
It wasn't them. It was that president who had pardoned. And we sort of thought, what? It's just not right. So, but the big thing is those people who came back from Canada, they came back to America because they loved that nation, even though they had actually avoided it. And so many people today, when they come to America, they don't understand the importance of America. And so today we have that in our nation. We have some people who have come here who have no desire to be an American. They're just here for whatever reason. They think they're going to make rich. They're going to become movie stars. They're going to get whatever, but it's just not that case. And so after a while, after they lived here a while, they start becoming good Americans and realizing how important our Constitution is. And that's what we fight for. So when you see the American flag, it's not just a piece of cloth. It represents all the men and women who have fought for our nation for years and years and years. And so today we're sitting here peaceful where the rest of the world is sort of fighting with one another. And it's because we really do protect our borders nowadays, okay? We're protecting them now, but it's just to remember that for the little kids, to remember that sometimes you have to do things you don't really like, but you have to sort of stick up for the family. So right now, is there anybody here who wouldn't stick up for the family? So we would all stick up for we'd all stick up for the family, but in reality, the family is America, and we try to protect that. And so it's sort of a hard thing, so especially for little kids to find out why we go to war. Well, so we have a break we're going to take for a little bit, and then we're going to come back, and I'm going to go over just a couple of things at 4 o'clock.